Hey everybody, welcome back to Dental Unfiltered. I'm Matt Brown. My normal co-host here is Dr. Andrew Vallow. We have a super awesome guest today, um, Alex Sharp. He's the CEO of Shared Practices Group, primarily a 50-unit DSO that is like 90% employee or 90% implant only de novos, and that's kind of really a unique scenario. Lots of people built groups, but like 90% implant only, denture only group at that size is pretty crazy. So Alex, first, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves, and then we'll get into our subject, which is de novos versus acquisitions, which is always a cool subject, and to hear another expert like you come on is really awesome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and your journey and kind of what you love to do in dentistry?
Well, Matt, Andrew, thank you guys for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller to your podcast. So thanks for having me. No, I'm Alex. I'm a dentist by training, and as you said, now I've found my calling in dentistry. I feel like, which is to be the leader of a large group and to create the conditions that I wish I would have had as a dentist coming out of dental school. I think my reason for existing is to help people navigate through the fog of dentistry, because I feel like the highs are higher, the lows are lower, as a new dentist coming out of school now, where you can have just a level of success that would have been unthinkable decades ago, but you could also struggle harder than most people struggled in decades past. So the amplitude of the curve between the top performers and the ones that struggle is massive nowadays. And so my thought process is, how do we standardize success? How do we make success a ladder that you climb, a path that you follow, that is paved and curated, rather than having to hack your way through the jungle like most of us did when we graduated school years ago? And so for us, we found that instead of being a jack of all trades like I tried to do, because I tried to add full arch implantology into my practice, and I say tried because you have to commit. In my experience, you have to say, you know what, I'm going to burn the boats. I'm going to start a practice that is squarely just for this type of dentistry, because otherwise the pull or the temptation to fall back on your laurels and say, all right, I can do hygiene, or oh, okay, I can do this crown case, or oh, I can do same day endo. If you make those concessions, then you're not sufficiently putting the blinders on to be able to achieve excellence at the one thing that you're committing to. And so for us, the reason we exist is we want to democratize the fixed arch. We want to make the full arch implantology accessible not just to the patients, but upstream of that, accessible to the dentists that want to do the procedure. And so for me, my mantra is simplicity. Narrow the focus. If you try to be all things to all people, you're going to be nothing to anybody.
That's awesome. Hey, Alex, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, man. I've been a huge fan of shared practices since I was in dental school, and I used to drive to the middle of nowhere, Ohio, about an hour and 20 minutes each way, and I'd listen to. I mean, on podcasts were my education. Podcasts are what launched me on the path that I've gotten myself on, and share. I know you haven't been with shared practices the whole time, but just being part of a group that's given so much back to dentistry, I really appreciate that, and I'm excited to have you on and pick your brain. Like shared practices, a lot of our listeners are young dentists. They're either, fresh out of school, new owners. And so a lot of times when we have guests on, we like to talk about your like career path. So, if you could just quickly like let us know like what was your path out of dental school? What did you do? How long did it take you to become, either an owner involved in the group and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I started off. I mentioned the fog earlier. I mean, I graduated dental school and I didn't know my butt from a hole in the ground. Frankly, I took a job that looked like it paid well, that looked like it was going to give me reps, and I got really good at doing surgery on Medicaid patients. And I got my reps, I got my level of comfort providing the care, and then I figured out, okay, there's got to be something more than this. And I ended up finding SP, finding the podcast in its very nascent period, and I started listening, started contributing, started recording episodes, started the mastermind that was like doctor to doctor back in the day, and was helped with the early seminars. And so we saw that there was a demand for something greater in dentistry. That sounds so trite and overused, but dentists were just tired of toiling away in obscurity and not maxing out what was possible in their careers. And so then COVID happened, and we saw the tidal wave coming. We saw the DSO onslaught coming for all of us. And so my thought process was, well, we can either put our heads in the sand and hope that we're unaffected, or we can get our surfboard and start riding that wave. And that's what we decided to do, is to say, all right, if we build something together, because we built this community, we built this network, everyone was clamoring to do something together. And so our thought process was, what would the ideal opportunity look like? What would the opportunity that we wish we would have had straight out of school look like? And for us, we learned that if we narrow the focus, if we constrict the aperture through which we're viewing these opportunities, then we're able to really say, all right, what's the best use of our time each day, like per unit time? How am I delivering the most value for patients? And here's the thing that was the big unlock, was realizing that there's a huge difference between a patient that walks in to pay you money to be given a new lease on life, to go from no teeth to teeth, or to go from inability to chew or get a job or get back on the social scene, that they're tripping over themselves to become a patient of yours, versus the person that you're like having to drag by the ear to do a quadrant of composites. They hate paying you the money. They don't see why they have to do it. They don't understand the value. Their life is no different after forking over a bunch of money to you, compared to someone whose life was completely transformed by full arch rehabilitation or full arch implants. So that's the simple thesis of saying, hey, blank Etch a Sketch, what do we want to draw? I only want to serve the patients that need us the most, because that's how we deliver the most value. That's how we maximize our own impact. And that was our genesis, our origin story, was to say, let's preferentially find the doctors that want to deliver the most impact, because there's so many patients out there. There's so much white space for this type of dentistry, that you go where others don't or won't or can't. You serve those patients that have been chewed up and spit out, pardon the pun, by the dental establishment, or ignored. And then that's where the magic happens.
That's great. And I want to jump on what you said about like doing high value dentistry and high value activities. And so this is something we were talking about right before we launched, this episode, or started to hit record, which is leveraging your time. And, it is putting a value. And so this has been a focus of mine lately. And I think it's important both in your clinical dentistry. Most of our listeners are clinical dentists still at this point in time. So if you're a clinical dentist, like, you should be doing time journaling. You should be doing some type of blockout scheduling. You should make sure that each hour that you're in the office, you're maximizing the value of that time. And adding, high value services, high ticket services, things like Invisalign, if you're not doing it already, things like dental implants. That's huge. I was at one of my mastermind events recently, and a dentist that I've gotten to know fairly well over the years. She's got a huge thriving practice. They just expanded to 26 operatories. She's got multiple associates. She's been bread and butter. They've been bread and butter dentistry the whole time. So they're just in a great location, great patient experience, great systems, very, very, just incredible practice. But she has a newer associate who, does implants. They want to add it. And she was just talking about some of the stresses and pressure points of trying to add this new procedure. And she was saying, I don't know if it's worth it, and I'm concerned about the risk, and I'm concerned about this. And that was kind of the feedback to her during this hot seat type of round table, was like, listen, like, this is a high value, high dollar per hour service that you're adding to this amazing practice. Like, think about what you can do if you leverage this service and include it in your practice. Like, it is absolutely worth the headaches. It's worth the stress. It's worth the frustration. It's worth figuring out how to do it. And like, the great thing is, in today's community, like, you have so many resources. You've got podcasts that talk about how to do it. You've got dental Facebook groups that talk. You've got coaches that talk about how to do it. So I think that's a valuable lesson. I think that all of our listeners should take, is like, try to maximize the value of your time, both clinical and your personal time. I was telling Matt and Alex, my wife and I, and I'll be honest, like, we were a little bit hesitant, my wife particularly, but we just hired a house manager. And the reason for that is because, I've got this growing dental business. We've got our second child on the way. We've got a crazy 3.5-year-old. And it's just becoming so tough to manage things at the house. And every hour that I'm spending doing something at home that's not spent on my family, that's not spent growing my business, it feels to me like it was a waste of my time, and I wasn't leveraging my time. So I think that's a really important point that I think you made in the middle of all that.
And the trick about doing that well is that you're gonna let people down. You're gonna have to learn. You're gonna have to learn to say no, and obviously we know that. But a lot of dentists that are learning the ropes and learning to prioritize their time and understand that not all procedures are created equally, not all procedures provide the same amount of impact for patients, and that causes you to have to examine through a very tough filter. Do I want to accept these insurances? Do I want to keep doing XYZ procedures? Because you're talking about the example of the associate coming in and adding implants. Adding implants is a very tough road when they think of it in those terms, because when you're adding implants, then you're dipping your toe in the water, you're putting one foot in the implant sandbox, and that's how everyone starts. But you need to have a path, you need to have a ramp where you say implants are going to comprise whatever percentage of my practice by such and such date, or else you're going to remain dabbling. And then when you're a perpetual dabbler, there's a very clear ceiling on how far you can go in any pursuit. And so I think that's the temptation to fight, is to say like, hey, I'm gonna implicitly prioritize these other procedures by not saying no to them. So sometimes you have to be explicit and say, look, because I'm adding implants, I'm cutting this, because you can't just add more hours to the day in general.
No, that's a good point, man. And so I've got a few implant only offices, and then I would say at this point 75% of my group is general, where we do both. And it is interesting as I look at both office mixes and some of the benefits and drawbacks of each option, some of the different challenges that come with each option. But it is tough in some of our even in our general offices. We've got the super GPs that are doing the full arch implant type cases. But it is a challenge when you start to have restorative filling their schedule, or you've got docs that are in this general office that no longer want to do fillings and are basically trying to punt patients off or whatever it is. So I think that's a good point too, about kind of going all in if you want to create one of these specialty models. I'm the verdict's still out for us. We've kind of tried both ways. We've gone back and forth a few times. I think for me, the biggest thing that I've realized is, for the most part, our implant only offices are smaller offices. And so, generally speaking, I've been looking for bigger I like the idea of having 8 to 10 to 12 operatories. And I'm not sure about your guys' makeup. And obviously you can do the implant centers where you have those bigger locations and you've got 2 or 3 implant docs just kind of running full time. And maybe that's the absolute, best way to do it. But I will say, I think that's been one of the things that steered me more towards the larger general practices that also incorporate a lot of implants. Is just because it means I'm going for a bigger footprint. I'm going for more operatories. I'm going for more providers, that type of a thing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can be successful multiple ways in dentistry, and I think the stylistic choice is, do we go bigger in one location, or do we grow horizontally by adding locations in these markets of high amount of opportunity. We made the decision to say, all right, there's so many different underserved places. Let's leverage our unfair comparative advantage, which is our ability to recruit doctors. So let's use that advantage and go to these places where a lot of others can't. And so we've chosen the route of opening more locations in these further flung places where there's just a glut of patients that need what we do, versus doubling down on the physical capacity of one location, moving it multiple providers. Because I've done both. Like, I've done that in the general setting where you're adding operatories and you're adding providers and you're adding hygiene hours, and that works great. It just depends on the model, and it just goes to show that there's no one defined paint by numbers approach. Like, dentistry is such a great business because all the naysayers would take issue with that by saying how challenging it's become and how margins are crimped.
It's still a great business compared to what else is out there. If you compare, listen, dentists have 2 unique business conditions in America. When I say this to them, they're like, oh, number 1, everyone needs you guys. It's a target rich environment. Number 2, everyone fears you. So if they make it to your chair, it's the greatest sales situation ever. They overcame fear to be there. They're motivated, and there's a need. Let me tell you, I'm a lifetime sales guy. If I can come up with a sales scenario like that, that's pretty amazing. And it's like everyone needs these services. It's funny, you mentioned like niching down to the services, and then you mentioned going at the far-flung places. I find 2 mistakes when docs do like arch or like implant specific practices. or they want to add implants. So I see a GP that wants to add implants. He also just tried to add clear aligners, and I find they're dipping their toes in lots of places, and then doing like a few starts of clear aligners, a few implants, but they're not really good at either one, and they don't really get enough volume to do that. But also, I also had a doc who opened up a practice in West Palm Beach, Florida, and he called us, and he wasn't doing arches, he wasn't doing implants. He said, "I built this implant center. There's money here, but the patients just don't want it." And I'm like, yeah, because everyone in West Palm Beach, Florida that has a $10 million home took care of their mouth. You built a Profi Palace. Like, and I agree with you, the places that need it. Some of our best practices that did it were like in rural Oklahoma or just outside Oklahoma City, like 20 minutes. And it's like these underserved areas are underserved and the work is there because they didn't have access to it. So it was easy to avoid it. It was pretty interesting because that's what we always tell people is like go to a rural area where there's a high need for these services. And like, but I want to live in the middle of the city and do it. And it's like, well, the need isn't there. And the patient acquisition cost is way higher. So
Well, and I'll push back on you a little bit there, Matt, because in my mind, you can be successful in any demographic, and so that I have dentists ask me all the time.
Easier success in the rural
Yeah,
areas.
no, and
Easier success.
parts of it are. I think recruiting team members and doctors can be more challenging in the rural
No,
areas.
definitely can be.
You've got a less dense population, which means you've got less targets, that you're reaching out for. You got less competition for sure. So I mean, we've got practices in more rural parts of Florida. We got practices in like Miami and Fort Lauderdale. There are challenges to both. But like at the end of the day, when I have dentists come up to me and say, because this is one of the questions I'm asked most frequently, what demographic, reporting do you use when you're selecting locations? And I said, I don't. Not since practice number one have I used any demographics. All I do is I look for, basically, so our model is second gen spaces. We look for a, abandoned dental office where we can just kind of come in and everything's already built out. Sometimes there's even equipment that comes with it, or we purchase it, for a low dollar amount. And I'm looking for where those spaces are, how many operatories they are. Is it close enough, to my group where we're not going into a whole nother region that we're not ready to go into yet? But is it far enough away from my closest practice so it's not cannibalizing, ourselves? And that's it. Other than that, I really don't care about the demographics. And so like that, I guess that is a mindset point of mine. But at the same time, is there a gold mine out there in rural America? Absolutely. So I don't disagree with you on that. I just think that people place too much emphasis on where you go, where I think you can really be successful anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think what I would add to what you just said, Andrew, is that you can be successful anywhere if you're properly differentiated. If you're doing something that is not replicable by the person across the street or across town, what will make people want to drive to you? How many dental offices will someone pass to come see you because of the procedures that you do, your pricing, your availability, level of care? Like there's got to be some differentiator that's your toehold for being able to market yourself. And so I think the big secret that's not really a secret is what Matt said, which is if you want to do just like standard dentistry and you want to be a clinically excellent person that serves the whole family and you want to make a great living, just go where others aren't. Like that's the simple thing to do, because I see it in Arkansas all the time. I'm in Arkansas, so I drove to my cousin's wedding a few weeks ago, and I passed multiple towns of 7 to 10,000 people with zero dentists. And so for the demographics that we've done, and I'm sure that the days that you looked at it, Andrew, this dentist to population ratio. If you're like 1 to 5,000, 1 to 7,000, 1 to 10,000, you are crushing it because there's no competition at all. So you can go hang a shingle and just annihilate if you go to one of those places. So you could play the game on easy mode, and that's available to everybody if you're not beholden to living in any one place. But if you're inflexible in where you want to live, then the onus is on you to be differentiated. Because if you're a commodity, if you offer commoditized dentistry, then people are going to treat you like a commodity, and they'll just go to someplace closer or cheaper to receive said commodity.
Well, it's kind of like a cheat code. So, I agree with that. And I think your marketing goes further. Or like in some of these locations, you probably almost don't have to market because the people are just happy there's a dentist there. And everyone talks about it and, writes about it in the papers and all that stuff. So, 100% agreed. Rural, great opportunity. But I always make these points because I've got docs that, really want to live in a certain area, but they're like, I'm scared to go there because I think there's too much competition. And you know, my feedback is if you're willing to invest in great marketing, and to your point, Alex, if you're willing to differentiate yourself with great patient experience, great branding, great offers, great pricing. Sometimes it's taking insurance. You know, if you're in the middle of rural America, you probably don't need to be a network with insurance. Whereas if you're in Miami or Fort Lauderdale and you want to see a high volume of patients, you probably need to be a network with PPOs. So a lot of differences, different games, but I think you can be very successful at both ones.
With differentiating, we have a practice that's in like the worst zip code in the country, Flint, Michigan, and they do crazy numbers. And they have 15 passenger vans, and they go to the underserved communities and they actually bring in their patients. Like if you have an appointment, they'll stack their appointments from neighborhoods and take the vans and bring people in because they have.
It's a good way to decrease no shows, man.
Yeah, and then there'll be households where there's like one car and it's like not very reliable, and they'll call last minute and say, "Hey, I had a car problem." They'll say, "Okay, we're on our way to pick you up." And dude, they do crazy numbers, and they're the only ones in Flint, Michigan, bringing people in by like little 15 passenger vans, and just everyone's like, "Oh, they'll come pick you up. We'll go there," and they grew so rapidly because of that.
Yeah, so you plot them on a bell curve relative to all of their competition in Flint, Michigan, and they're 2 or 3 standard deviations beyond what anybody else is doing performance-wise, because they're creative. They're solving the problem. I mean, I'm a big fan of this book, so if you guys haven't read it, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. The Goal. If you haven't read it, read it. And what this is, if you Eli Goldratt, so he's like a economics guy, and so this is the theory of constraints, is what this is. So if you plot out your process, like say you're a general practice, you plot out all the steps of what it takes to go from reaching your patients all the way through all of the steps and what the patient goes through until treatment is fulfilled, and then they go back into the recall cycle. And so you'll have some type of a graphic where you whiteboard what the assembly line looks like. And then you figure out, okay, where is my process breaking down? And it's different for every practice. That's part of the fun, is trying to uncover where the bottleneck is. So what we do is we try to figure out, okay, we have a fairly simple flow where we've mapped out all 8 steps of our process to go from people finding out about us to people receiving treatment. And all we do is we marshal all of our resources to alleviate the one bottleneck. Because when you have a simple model, you can marshal everybody's effort on the one bottleneck. So that's what I would think about is the case study in Flint. They found their bottleneck: show rate. Patients don't show up. If you get patients to show up, everything else goes way better. So now, guess what? They have another bottleneck. They've solved the show rate problem. So what's the next bottleneck?
Number of providers, number of operatories. You know, you solve that. Now it's treatment acceptance.
Dude, they're up to like 18 operatories and 4 providers and 3 are full time. Yeah, no, the place is a machine. And it's like, to give an idea of the neighborhood, like when I went there, they're like, don't drive that direction. And they had a light on top of the building, and there's cameras in the building that go to the police department. Like, docs, you can't make it such a bad market. These guys figured it out, and it's remarkable to watch this practice.
That's so inspiring.
Are you guys a no hygiene model since you're implant offices? Does that mean there's no hygienists in those offices, or are there hygienists?
There's no hygienists in those offices. Like we've built reciprocity with local friendly GP practices to handle like the ongoing care. But yeah, that was again kind of a decision that we made early on where we felt like we're erring on the side of simplicity. We're erring on the side of giving the patients what they want. And again, our patients are the ones that have not been regular dental patients for a period of time. Like there are and you know this with doing your foray into surgery, we're not reaching these people that have been reliable to show up and be on perio maintenance. Like these are people that have been dentally disenfranchised, is my term that I use, where dentistry's passed them by. It's either been too scary, they've been too traumatized, it's been too expensive, it's been unreachable geographically. Everybody has their reason for why they haven't shown up. And so for these people, just coming in and getting it done is a huge accomplishment. And then, yeah, we talk about the importance of maintenance, the importance of, ongoing care and protecting your investment. So yeah, that's a part of it, though we don't directly do it.
So, and that the reason I asked that is kind of transitioning to my next point here, which is, guys, a no hygiene model is much easier to scale in the sense of you don't have to find hygienists for every practice. You've got lower payroll overhead. Our implant only offices, the ones that are killing it, have our highest margins because you're cutting payroll costs. All the patients coming in the door are doing big ticket procedures. You're doing more dollars per hour. The downside of this model, and something to think about, is you don't have that recurring revenue. So in most of our dental practices, guys, like, we really have this amazing recurring revenue source, which is our customers come back. At least most of them should be, in my mind, 95% plus should be coming back on a regular basis for their 6-month hygiene recalls. So you've got recurring revenue in a general dental practice. You don't have recurring revenue in specialty practices or in implant only practices. Now, most specialty practices do have, referring doctors. And that was going to be my next question to you, because Alex, like, our implant groups or our implant offices, we've built on direct to consumer marketing. So we just do direct to consumer implant marketing. We offer good deals. We offer competitive pricing. We offer free consultations, all kinds of things. And we invest a good amount of money in marketing to make that happen. Have you guys tapped into the referral network? Has that become a big part of your implant offices?
I mean, it's almost exactly beat for beat what you described, where it's primarily direct to consumer, going where the other dentists aren't, and then yeah, referrals are icing on the cake. And as many markets as we're in, we have some, like I said, to use the word reciprocal again, we have these you scratch my back, I scratch yours relationships with some of the local GPs that we've developed. But it's not something that we've been able to scale across the country to all of our locations. So it's nice when you get that, because you occasionally your marketing gets people in that don't need what we do. They're not a candidate for what we do. They have healthy teeth. They just need like a cleaning and Invisalign or something. So then we build goodwill by referring those people to the friendly GPs, who then send us the people that need what we do.
Yeah, we've looked into the referral, and we've tried some, kind of going door to door and bringing in donuts or lunch or whatever it is, and we've got a little bit of traction there. But I think the biggest problem, honestly, guys, is just that more and more GPs are placing implants. So I think you've got less of those people. People want to refer out endo more than they want to refer out implants. Which the plus side of this is it makes it a lot easier to find great doctors to come in and work in these implant only offices, because that is a desirable procedure that a lot of doctors want to do. So again, everything has two sides of the coin. I'll take it. Again, competition in my mind is iPhones and vacations and other things that patients prioritize over their dentistry. It's not other dentists. And I love the fact that I can find amazing GPs to come in, because we don't have any specialists in the group. I don't know about you guys, but and we did this intentionally. All of our doctors within our group, they're all GPs, but they've all taken the advanced coursework. They're all up to chop, or up to par with what they need to do as far as the implants go. And I think for us that works better for a few different reasons. But I'm interested to hear what you guys do with that.
Yeah, I mean, we're of a mind with that. So we find doctors that come from a variety of different backgrounds, but the common denominator is they have the raw fundamentals to be able to thrive in this model. So we have doctors that come from different implant heavy residencies. We get doctors that are 10 years in practice, that have done extensive amounts of CE on their own. But again, the common thread is that they've done enough dentistry to know this is what I'm genetically encoded to do, as opposed to going around on roller skates like I did, and like I suspect you did for a lot of years, trying to be all things to all people clinically. And they said, you know what, I'm going to lay down the gauntlet, and I'm just going to restrict my focus on just this. And so what the big piece, though, is in a vacuum, it's hard as a single player to do that. It's because one of the biggest hurdles for me learning the ropes on full arch implants was I was an army of one, and I didn't have a true network to lean on. And so I feel like the big advantage is, how do you leverage the group of doctors that's all doing the same thing? And that's where I feel like the value proposition for what we do is, doctors join us and they're in our online learning platform, they're in our Discord group, they're in mentorship program, they're receiving over the shoulder support. I mean, there's just lots of ways to actually turn your scale into a strength. I think that's the thing that gets a little easier with time, is that just by virtue of your raw size, you get a little more heft behind you when you're supporting these newer doctors, and so the ramp time gets it's less and less over time. Your ability to hire because of like the feedback loop of, hey, this person had this set of credentials, this amount of experience. Here's how that person panned out. Let's preferentially sort through the applicants and find people just like that. And so then you get this positive feedback loop that you learn over time. So
It's so funny as you're talking about this. A thought just came in my mind, and it's like, there's a big push for like finding the ideal patient. I think that goes back to, different demographics and doctors wanting to go in the high income demographics, and this is the person they're looking for. And in my mind, again, maybe it's a little different in the implant only offices because you're looking for people that would benefit from full arch implant. So maybe there is an ideal patient kind of there. But in our general practices, I always say my ideal patient is anyone with or without teeth. So anybody with or without teeth is my ideal patient. I don't need someone in this, income level. I don't need someone, with this age or this whatever. We just want more people in the door, and we're going to serve them, as well as we can. That said, I do feel like there's an ideal doctor avatar. And I think as the group grows, we've started to kind of refine that. And I agree with you 100%. Like, we've learned the hard way bringing in some docs who, just maybe weren't cut out for the type of work that we're trying to do. And I think it's become easier to identify the docs that are going to absolutely crush it in the offices. And the other cool thing is that we're allowing doctors to do the dentistry that they love to do. So it's like, I feel like our implant only docs that, they're some of the happiest doctors because they're coming in and they're doing surgery, which is their passion, it's their calling. I mean, I think you said it's like in their DNA. And they absolutely love it. They love coming to work, and they work hard. I mean, they're doing a ton of arches every week and a ton of consults, and they're running around, but they've got a great team behind them. And so I think it's great if you can identify, and I would say this to I think one of the biggest downfalls of the dentists I know that have brought on associates is that they're not really putting a lot of effort into finding the right associate. Their mindset is, hey, I want to find someone to come in and help, and they're more focused on like, how do I train them, how do I onboard them, how do I split patients, how do I make sure this is a good long-term fit for them, and they're less focused on like, is this the right person to come in and take my practice to the next level? And that's been one of the biggest levers we pulled because we've gotten more and more selective in both the general and the implant offices and the type of doctors you bring in. And I think if you bring in the right associate, everything else matters a whole lot less.
yeah, I mean the aphorism that I lean on all the time is the team you build is the company you build. Again, sounds like a truism, but I've found that because I mean, dentistry is people working with people on other people. We chose a very people intensive business to get into, for better or for worse. The service economy is largely undisruptible by AI because of the fact that there's so many people. But then the flip side is we're not just shipping code every day, like a lot of our analogs in like tech world. So there's a people dependent element of this that can't be overlooked. And so your wins and your failures are commensurate with the people that you onboard, how you onboard them, how you manage performance, how you encourage them to perpetually climb the ladder. And yeah, I mean, you have to learn to love the people stuff. And if you don't learn to at least respect the people element of the job, then you're going to go even grayer than I am, because it's just an ongoing challenge every single day to say that not everyone's a rational actor. You want to hope that everyone's a rational actor, but then you just have to get better, and you have to have the extreme ownership mindset of saying like, hey, if someone made it through our filtration process that wasn't a good fit, what about our filtration process was bad, as opposed to blaming the person who made it through, because you let them through at the end of the day.
No, I think ownership mentality, it's like the buck stops with you, and all problems come back to you. You can, at this point in time, I'm sure very similar to you guys, we've got, a fully built out executive team, and we've got, different levels of separation between, myself and the offices. And so there are a lot of things that I'm not directly responsible for on a day-to-day. I would say the majority of things. At this point, I'm not super involved in the day-to-day operation of my group. I'm more involved in the future growth and the big systematic changes and things like that. However, when there's a breakdown, it comes down to me. And I looked at this morning, because I still do some audits occasionally, even though I've got different team members doing them, because I want to see with my own eyes what's going on within our group. And I did an audit, and I found out there was a patient who had sent us a flex message to cancel their appointment on short notice. And the team member just canceled the appointment and didn't even flex the patient back. And that's like a huge no-no in our, like, I mean, that literally broke so many different roles in our SOPs. And, you know, I was frustrated, and I did actually flex the patient back and went through our standard protocol and all that stuff. And I was about to just let it go. And I said, you know what? No, like, if I let this go, then like I really am the problem, because, you know, I'm not giving that feedback to our teams, to our, you know, our COO, to our regional manager, to our office managers, to the teams themselves. And so I did that. And I sent an email to the entire organization, and I didn't call, you know, this officer, this person out, but I screenshotted just the text message itself. And I said, guys, like this is breaking so many different protocols. Like we need to make I need to make sure everyone understands this policy fully, because we invest so much time, effort, and money into getting the schedule full for all of your offices, that we've got to invest just as much time and effort into keeping the schedule full. So I think that's absolutely true. I think you need to have ownership mentality as the CEO of the company, just like all of your executive team, just like all of your office managers, just like all your associate doctors. And that's actually one of our topics for our upcoming annual summit we do for our organization, is going to be ownership, and how everyone can take that ownership mentality no matter what their role is in the organization.
Yeah, and the hard part is that when people hear that, they hear, okay, sense of ownership, cool. The buck stops with me in my own domain within my four walls. My name's on the door. Got it. The hard part for us as leaders is to say that not all decisions, not all touch points, not all data is equal. So like to the team member, I would venture to say that team member probably had a lapse in judgment around messaging that patient back or not following protocol, because to that team member that was just another thing to do on the to-do list, rather than having a clear visceral understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's the hard part for me, leading people, is to communicate the why, to get them to be self-propelled, to get them to want to commit to the set of actions that we all agree to following every day. Because to them, it's like, I got to do this, and I got to do that, and I got to do that. And so the hard part is, how do we create that distinction between these are the just do or die, gotta do things, versus like, here's the things that keep the lights on, versus here's the things that are nice to do if you can get to them. So clarity of training around our why helps to make clear the priorities, because the one priority for something to be a priority, it's having to be a taller poppy or a louder scream than everything else that they could be filling their time with, because they could be thinking like, oh, I got to get back to this thing over here, this is important too, but really it's just twiddling their thumbs or busy work relative to what's most important. So for us, as clear as we think we're being about our why and what the non-negotiables are, I guarantee there's still a lot of dropped balls in terms of clarifying the message. I've learned that the hard way.
That's such a great point, Alex. And I think, you know, basically what you're saying is, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And, you know, like I have received feedback, which I think is fair, that, you know, it's just information overload. And I think sometimes I am guilty of trying to optimize things that don't need to be optimized. And that's something that I've been trying to work on too, is like, hey, like, does this really move the needle? And if the answer is no, then we probably don't need to optimize it. Like 80% good is probably good enough, because if our team has to invest that extra bandwidth in learning this new system to make something slightly better that wasn't really making a big difference in the success of the group, then that's taking away from something else. So I think that's a great point. And how do we differentiate what is truly a priority versus what's not? It's difficult. You know, it is.
We always talk about intentionality on the show, and it really sounds like if you made it simple, it's prioritize, focused intentionality, right? It's like you're prioritizing where your intentionality is going, and you're focusing down on that intentionality, because you can't be intentional with all things, and you can't take all information in to create intentionality. So it's really prioritized and focused intentionality.
I guess like an example I would go to would be in our hygiene department. You know, we've that's been a struggle. While our, you know, practices, revenue, and everything for the most part has grown substantially. You know, our startups typically do between 1.5 and 3 million their first 12 months, and our doctors are super productive and all this stuff. Hygiene has been a struggle for us, and it has gotten a lot better as we've made it more of a priority and as we've brought on a chief hygiene officer and things like that. But I realize every single month, we're talking about every single hygiene KPI. And, more recently, I kind of realized, like things like perio visit percentage, perio diagnosis, those things are really, things like reappointment percentage, those things are really moving the needle. Things like fluoride percentage, like would I like our fluoride percentage to be at 85%? Like, heck yeah, I would. But is getting fluoride from 55 to 85%, is that going to move the needle as much as getting perio visit percentage from 36% to 51%? No, it's not. So it's like I have realized that as we have these meetings, like I need to set goals tied around the things that are actually going to move the needle. So.
Dude, that's I'm getting PTSD listening to you say that, because I spent so many recall cycles back in the day. This is like almost 10 years ago. Like, all right, I always chunked things out into recall cycles because I felt like you could initiate a meaningful change, implement that meaningful change, and then see the coming to fruition of the result of that meaningful change in about the span of a recall cycle, roughly. So I spent so many recall cycles on like the fluoride piece and the perio piece, and I weighted them equally when I was running the hygiene element of my original practice. I weighted it equally as like treatment acceptance. So I talked about like fluoride, perio, and treatment acceptance. And in hindsight, I attacked the easy problems, which were fluoride, perio percentage, and I didn't put enough energy or effort into the big hairy problem of treatment planning, treatment acceptance coming out of the hygiene chair, because that was such a multifaceted problem that I feel like, to your point about, okay, if we're going to have a hygiene meeting and we're going to have a training and we're going to track something and we're going to maybe even attach an incentive structure to it to sweeten the pot so that all of our incentives are aligned, what do we want to prioritize? Like, that's the leadership question. That's where, like, one false move, we burn 3 months of work or something, or we burned the decision fatigue of our people, and we lose credibility because we zigged when we should have zagged. And so that's where, when people hear like, oh, the CEO sits in an ivory tower and just pontificates about strategy all day long, well, that's the kind of stuff that has very real consequences if you don't nail. And so I didn't nail spending enough time early enough on with the case acceptance piece, the explaining the needs of the patient, narrating around the intraoral photos, getting the patient prepped to receive the recommendation when the doctor came in the room. That's such a great use of time and energy to calibrate the hygiene team, because if you get an army of hygienists that are completely conversant in, here's the recurrent decay, here's the crack, here's the potential sequelae of the crack. It could be a crown, it could be a crown and root canal, it could be an implant, and then the doctor comes in and just basically ties it up with a bow. That's a great use of training in the hygiene model compared to the lower hanging fruit.
Man, this is so good and so deep, and I'm going to zoom out even a little bit further, because what I've realized over the last, I don't know, 6 months is that and I guess this is going to go to the point of, at least optimize the most important things first. So again, it's like you can't optimize everything, and we probably shouldn't be optimizing things that aren't going to move the needle at all. But I think even before all that is like, pick the most important things to optimize for. One of the things that I did not try to optimize until much further down the road was our sales process. And I know that sales is a dirty word in dentistry, but at the end of the day, guys, like, we're a business just like every other business out there, and businesses survive on sales. And you still have to be good at sales, even if you've got great providers, even if you've got great marketing. And so, my point is, early on in my career, when I opened my first office and second office and third office and all that stuff, I was very focused on things like Google reviews. And don't get me wrong, Google reviews are good, but I was spending an inordinate amount of my time focused on how can we get more Google reviews, which at the end of the day was only making so much of an impact on the growth of my group. Whereas I spent like zero time basically on how can we close more treatment, which is sales. So over the last 6 months or so, it's like, we appointed a chief sales officer. We implemented weekly sales meetings with our treatment coordinators. We implemented more role playing. We implemented more scripting. I went out to Alex Hormozi's course in Vegas and learned how like real organizations do sales. I was actually taking notes as they were trying to sell to me to join his, big mastermind group and all this stuff. I was like, man, they are so good at selling to me, and I feel like I'm like unsellable to that. I'm like asking this 22-year-old kid about like their process and all this stuff, and he's like, "Oh, well, sign up and you're gonna learn everything." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I know, man. Like that's great." So like I guess like in hindsight, had I focused on prioritizing some of the most important things earlier on, and I get it. Like when you first open a startup, there are a lot of things that you do have to kind of figure out. And so I'm not saying you could just ignore everything. And, if you're a new startup owner, like don't go, oh, Dr. Vallow said all I need to worry about is optimizing our sales process and everything else will come into place. That's not exactly what I'm saying. But I'm saying like in your first year of ownership, you should actually put some effort and attention into your sales process and your treatment acceptance. And like, I believe wholeheartedly from day one, you should have a dedicated treatment coordinator whose only job it is to sell treatment in office and to follow up with leads after the fact. And looking back, I wish I had done that from day one because I think I'd be a lot further along than I am now.
So here's another big unlock on that topic. We're used to linear thinking in dentistry. We're used to thinking that this person makes this amount per hour. That means that they need to be doing this amount of proportionate work per hour, work in quotation marks. But you know as well as I do that a well trained high capacity treatment coordinator, especially in the implant realm, makes all of his or her money in like a 15-minute window sometimes. And so then there's all this other work that is like support work. We're doing things like follow-ups, we're engaging with the patients upstream of when they walk through the door. There's all of this work that doesn't to the untrained eye doesn't look like work, because it's easy to think of a lab tech or a dental assistant. Their value is like drip 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 all throughout the day, and it can be too with a treatment coordinator, but it's kind of like sprinting versus marathon running. I think dentists and dental professionals and salespeople, when they're on stage, that's when they do their best. Like they all of the accessory work cannot crowd out when they're on stage on the pedestal, about to shine. So I think that there's a paradigm shift that you have to do in your head when you're normalizing what high performance looks like. And I think that's one thing that I had to learn, which is you have people that are doing kind of the steady state work to run a practice, maybe like your office manager or your traditional dental roles, but you almost have to treat your sales arm differently, because the mechanics of getting case acceptance, especially with bigger ticket dental procedures, it's not the same as just like drill, fill, bill, garden variety general dentistry. So, and I think at the Hormozy course, you probably learned some of that, where they have to have their blinders on, just as dentists in our model have to have their blinders on and say no to a lot of different types of care. Our sales team, our treatment coordinators have to have their blinders on to say, look, this is whatever's going on over here, I don't care about, because I only have eyes for this patient in front of me. And then as a leader, that's a challenge, because then you have to almost have two sets of norms for the people that are doing the selling, because they keep the lights on, and then everybody else that keeps the wheels on the bus.
I tell our executive team and our OMs, like whenever we have these leadership meetings, I always say, I want our dentist spending 99% of their time doing what only a dentist is qualified to do. And I want our treatment coordinators spending 99% of their time doing what only we would want someone who's good at sales doing. So it's basically like I get what you're saying. Like we have that one of our core values is teamwork. So everyone, it's like I have the expectation if an associate doctor is walking over a piece of trash, they're going to pick it up and put it in the garbage. But I think that's different than like intentionally having your high performers, the people that are driving the production, that are keeping the lights on the building. You don't want to intentionally have them doing things that someone else can do. Associate doctors, the assistants can like write their notes, and the doctors can then go in and review and add or change and submit them. But like, I don't want a doctor spending 2 hours of their day writing notes. And I've had doctors that have come in and want to do that between patients. Oh, I don't trust anyone else to write my notes. So I'm like, all right, well, they're not going to submit them. They're just going to tee them up for you, and then you can add or change or whatever else you got to do. They've got prompts they're using. You can help come up with the prompts, all that stuff. So it's hard to even sometimes convince those team members that they're so valuable that they should only be doing the things that only they can do.
Yeah, it's a shift, because a lot of dentists want to have their fingers in everything, but it comes down to not understanding what's the highest and best use of my time. And I think a lot of us coming out of school, we learn these bad habits by being in these practices that aren't busy enough. So then we have the ability to set up the rooms ourselves, tear down the rooms ourselves, do the sterilization ourselves, do the whole note ourselves because we're not seeing enough patients. But then when you're thrust into a busy practice, or better yet, a practice that has a lot of at bats to do high yield, high value treatment, then you have to commit to just saying, you know what, I have to put down the control freak tendency, because I think perfectionism is a disease that keeps us from actually saying no to the stuff that we need to say no to, and to
And
say
it's
to get back.
rampant in dentistry, man. So and speaking of time, we're just about out, but before we end this, Alex, I wanted to ask you, give me one or two of the biggest either like challenges that you guys have faced as growing a big group, or like lessons you've learned.
Oh man, I could fill a book about a foot thick with all of the lessons that we've learned along this journey. I would just say that when you're doing something new, and another book recommendation is Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma. When you're doing something new that is far afield from what the incumbents are doing, be ready to catch a bunch of arrows. Like have your shield calibrated, have your shield arm up, line up against your teammates so that they can protect your right side, 300 style, and just be ready, because if you do the same thing that anybody else does, you're not gonna rattle any cages. But to actually say, hey, what's the best way to do XYZ in dentistry or in life, you're gonna make some people mad.
I feel like you're speaking about me right now, Alex, but that's funny. You've seen some of the Facebook comments, but yeah,
The anonymous one you had recently.
yeah.
But see, that's a signal to me. You just have to be okay with being being the recipient of a lot of vitriol, because otherwise you would just do what everybody else does. You'd stay safe. You just keep your head down. You do your little do composites till kingdom come. But if you want to change things, then you're going to have to ruffle some feathers. And so that's the lesson that I would say, because if you're a dentist listening to this and you want the most out of your career, okay, you're going to have to be abrasive. You're going to have to embrace the friction. You're going to have to do things differently, or else you're just going to get the same results as everybody else. So it's okay. You get one life. You might as well live it.
Thanks for reaffirming that I'm doing nothing wrong here as I grow my group. But it is interesting, and you know, Matt and I have had so that this podcast, like half or 75% is probably the business of dentistry when Matt and I are on, and the other 25% is mindset and just kind of, you know, challenges we go through as humans and as business owners and as parents and what else. And you know, we talk about how it can be lonely at the top, and how as and I think it's great that you guys have this group of partners, and I am so grateful for my partner Sasha that's helped me grow this group, and some of our partner docs that have, you know, bought in equity and you know, all that stuff too. But it can be lonely at the top, and I think when people don't like when they see you going outside the status quo. So like when you're going outside the box, when you're breaking the norms, and unfortunately, I saw another dentist was talking about this in a group recently, but like there are people that don't like to see others succeed. So like even if they don't think you're necessarily doing anything wrong, like it bothers them that you're being successful, and that they're not. And I mean, like, it is challenging. You have to kind of grow thick skin, and you have to not be afraid about it. And you kind of have to, I mean, Hermosi talks about this a lot too. You kind of have to not care what other people think. You know, like you got to focus on your goal. You got to focus, as long as you're doing good, and you're doing things and you can sleep at night and you feel like you're doing things ethically. You just like don't care what other people think about what you're doing, you know. And I think if you are a dentist and you get yourself out of the chair to grow a dental group, just that fact alone is gonna piss some people off. You know, there's gonna be people, you know. So and anyways, I think that was a great lesson there, and I think that's a great point for any of our listeners that are looking to do, because we you know, we've got listeners that are growing groups, and they're at 4 practices and want to figure out what their next move is. And I think that's a great lesson that you will continue to learn as you go. And I think if you're prepared for it and just know, like, hey, people are going to talk shit no matter what, and you just have to be okay with that. It's one of the prices of success. If you don't have haters, you're not trying hard enough.
Bingo. Get me that bumper sticker. I'll put that bumper sticker on my truck.
Well, Alex, it was great to have you on, man. I really appreciate it. I feel like there's so much more we can go down this rabbit hole. Would love to do a second episode at some point in time.
No, it was a great podcast. You guys were kind of on a roll as to group owners, and I interrupted because there's a lot of important information. Hey guys, please like, subscribe, share, follow. We don't allow sponsors on the show. It's completely for the betterment of the community. And the Dental Unfiltered book is out. So contact us and we'll give you guys a copy. We're going to give away a bunch for free. And Dental Unfiltered's Guide to Being a Badass Practice Owner is officially out.
Big thank you to Matt because he did a lot of the heavy lifting on our first book. And thank you. Seriously, I think the book turned out awesome. Guys, last thing, if you haven't listened to the Shared Praxis podcast, I highly recommend right now go in your Spotify, Apple Music. One of my favorite dental podcasts out there. I obviously don't stop listening to ours, but go listen to their team as well. You're going to learn a lot from these guys. So
thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day.